nonviolence. But as Greens, we all support each other, and we all support all 10 key values. That's what makes us different. And one of the most fundamental differences when you look at ecological wisdom is we are literally the only party that admits we have to go carbon-free. We're the only party advocating what has to happen for the whole human race, for our entire society to survive. We know scientifically we can't keep putting CO2 into the air. But none of the other parties are calling for elimination of CO2. And why is that? It's because they're taking money from the largest industry in the world, the fossil fuel industry. And maybe some of them are doing it in a more roundabout way, through donations that go from this PAC to that PAC into the campaign coffers. But we're the only party that doesn't want any more pipelines. No more pipelines. We don't want any more fracking. No more fracking. We don't want any more fossil fuels. And the reason is because we understand ecological wisdom. Our actions, once again, flow from our values. And that is also something that makes us different from every other party. So when I was campaigning, I would be thrown questions on issues like, for example, I'd be in one county and they'd ask me about a local issue that frankly I didn't have any idea what was going on. So I'd ask for a quick explanation. And then I could apply the 10 key values and come up with a good answer to the question, because any action we Greens take once we get into office, and we're not just a club that believes in running people, we're a group of people that need to take political power, and we need to take it away from those in office now by replacing them. That's what a political party is all about. So I'm saying to all of you, once you run and once you get into office, put these values up on your wall. And as you're faced with your day-to-day decisions, use these values to make those decisions. That's what Greens already do that are in office. I use the examples. When the mayor of Richmond, California was a Green, and they had the foreclosure crisis, people were being kicked out of their homes all over the country. Well, not where a Green was mayor of Richmond, California. She used the city's condemnation powers to condemn the houses that people were about to lose. That took them away from the banks. Now the banks can't foreclose on them. They're condemned. They're worthless. Then she sold the houses back to the people already living in them at a price they could afford and a rate they could pay. So in Richmond, California, where the Greens were running things, there was no housing crisis. People did not get kicked out into the streets because she applied the principle of social justice and locally based economics. And that led to a successful solution to a nationwide problem, which is still crippling our country. I mean, people have not recovered from being kicked out of their homes. We've become a nation of renters, and that is wrong. And that is something else different about the Greens. We're willing to say some things are wrong, some things are right. And I'm very inspired by all the people that turned out today for this off-peak meeting of the Ohio Greens, because we have our biannual convention, which is the highest body in the Ohio Green Party. And we're going to have one in 2018 in the spring. So I urge all of you to come to that, because that's where we can pick candidates and make decisions and change our bylaws. So to just have a meeting in the middle of August on a beautiful Saturday and have all you guys turn out, so many of you are already candidates and many of you are considering to be candidates, I find that extremely inspiring. And I just want to thank you all. And just stick by the 10 key values, stay green, and we can save this planet, we can save this country. And we will, because we have to. Thank you.
Nathan? No, go through there, go through there, go through there.
Sorry. Hello, everybody. It's a pretty good sized room here. All right, my name is Nathan Lane. I'm presently a member of the Hamilton County and the State Central Committee of the Ohio Green Party. I'm also the State Volunteer Coordinator with the party. I also held that role during the 2016 Jill Stein campaign for president. Today I've been asked to discuss ballot access for the Ohio Green Party. Gaining and maintaining ballot access is ultimately the most crucial test, if you will, of any political party. I know this has already been discussed briefly, but I'll go way back to the beginnings. Back in the 90s, the Ohio Green Party actually had its origins here in the northeastern Ohio region. In 1996, this nascent Ohio Green Party collected signatures attempting to get Ralph Nader on the ballot for his first presidential run, but he came up short. In 2000, Paul Dumichel, is that correct? Dumichel? Dumichel convened a meeting of 11 prominent Ohio Greens and formed the committee that got Ralph Nader on the ballot in Ohio that year. Ohio sent 4 delegates to the 2000 Green Party Denver Convention: David Ellison, Darrell Davis, and 2 others that I could not find their names. Does anybody know who else went?
I'll have to think about that.
All right, good enough. Ralph Nader went on to receive 117,000 votes, or 2.5% of the vote in 2000. That was a breakout year for the Green Party in Ohio and nationally. However, this came up short of the 3% that was needed to secure ballot access for the Green Party for the next 4 years. As a result, we needed to collect signatures in 2004 to get the Green Party on the ballot again. We came up short in our effort to get David Cobb on the ballot for president, but he was available as a write-in option for voters in Ohio. Widespread evidence first collected by Greens showed that thousands of Ohio voters, especially African Americans and students, were either blocked from voting or their votes were uncounted. David Cobb joined with the Libertarian nominee to investigate the complaints and demand a recount after John Kerry quickly conceded the race to George Bush and his fellow Democrats took no action on the emerging scandal, as we could expect from a party that was most likely complicit in the votes being stolen in the first place. Greens raised most of the money for the legal fee and other fees for the Ohio recount, and our own Bob Petrakis was involved in this recount effort, and if I'm not mistaken, there were changes to election law as a result of that. On September 6, 2006, the Ohio U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit found that Ohio's laws for political party formation and ballot access were unconstitutional, and I believe, again, Bob Petrakis and Anita Rios were involved in this lawsuit. In 2008, representatives of several political parties filed suit again to obtain ballot access in Ohio for their presidential candidates and candidates for other offices, and these minor parties were the Constitution Party, Green Party, Libertarian Party, and Socialist Party USA. At that time, under Ohio Revised Code, political parties whose presidential candidate did not receive at least 5% of the vote in the general election ceased to be political parties in Ohio. In the 2008 general election, only the presidential candidates of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party received at least 5% of the vote, and this meant that all the minor parties stood to lose the ballot access that they had just gained as a result of the lawsuit in 2008. Fearing a repeat of the court challenges from 2008, the Board of Elections of Ohio issued directives keeping the same 4 minor parties on the ballot in 2010, 2011, and 2013. Those directives were rescinded in 2014 when the Ohio legislature finally passed a new bill, Senate Bill 193. Now minor political parties need to reach a certain percentage of the most recent statewide vote for president or governor to retain party status for 4 years. That minimum threshold was 2% in 2014, and it was raised to 3% in 2015. Minor parties failing to reach that percent required must submit party formation petitions to get back on the ballot, and the number of signatures must be at least 1% of the total vote for the most recent presidential election or gubernatorial election, which is roughly 56,000 voters, and my understanding is they would all need to be unaffiliated voters, if I read the law correctly, so they could not have voted for the Democratic or Republican Party in the previous election cycle. This bill, what's that?
Primaries.
Primaries, correct. Additionally, this bill adds the requirement that these petition signatures must include a minimum of 500 registered voters from half of Ohio's congressional districts, 8 of them. So they wouldn't just be statewide, they would be split among the state. We couldn't just do Columbus and Cincinnati and Cleveland. It would need to be a statewide collection effort. Now for a little bit about Ohio Green Party electoral history. In the '06 election, the Green Party received 40,000 votes, roughly 1% of the vote, when Bob Petrakis and Anita Rios ran for governor and lieutenant governor. Cynthia McKinney ran in 2008, but she only received 8,518 votes, 0.15% of the vote, far short of the threshold needed. In 2010, the Green Party received 58,000 votes, or 1.5% of the vote, when Dennis Spisak and Anita Rios ran for governor and lieutenant governor. In 2012, Jill Stein was on the ballot, but only received 18,000 votes, or roughly 1/3 of 1%. Now, this has been discussed briefly, and I'll touch on it again. In 2014, we were faced with a life or death situation as a political party. State law required 500 valid signatures for us to get a minor party candidate on the ballot, and we failed to get Dennis Spisak and Suzanne Petzer on the ballot. However, there was a provision in the state law which allows for a write-in method of getting a candidate on the ballot. We undertook a statewide write-in campaign to get Anita Rios and Bob Petrakis on the ballot, needing 500 statewide write-in votes in the primary to get Anita on the ballot for the general election. We succeeded with over 674 write-ins for Anita Rios, getting her on the ballot. And subsequently, in the 2014 general election, Anita Rios and Bob Petrakis received 101,706 votes for the Green Party, 3.35% of the vote, the best results we have ever received in Ohio. Having only needed 2% in 2014 to secure 4 more years of ballot access, Anita's 3.35% was more than enough to ensure that when 2016 came around, our presidential candidate would already have ballot access, which would free us up to focus on campaigning. As a result, in 2016, Jill Stein received 46,271 votes in Ohio, roughly 0.84% of the vote, the best numbers for a Green presidential candidate in Ohio since Ralph Nader's run in 2000. Also something worth clapping for. Now, the importance of this fact cannot be understated. Overstated, I guess would be the proper way to say it. We are fighting the 2018 race right now to ensure our success into the 2020 presidential race, just as much as we are fighting to ensure that we can run local and other national candidates. We don't need to be engaged in a statewide signature campaign in the spring and the summer of 2020, trying to gather 50,000 plus signatures from all corners of the state. It's my opinion that we need to be locked full speed into the presidential campaign so we can defeat the Democrats, defeat Trump and the Republicans, and win. That's it. Thank you.
Anita Rios, diversity in the Green Party.
Hello, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody, for putting this together. I'm so glad to see you all out here. Some of you are old friends, some of you are new friends. I'm supposed to talk to you about diversity in the Green Party. And I guess, you know, I was sitting back there wondering, in a sense, what that means. But I do know what it means. I know what it means because I see it in this room. And I like to talk about diversity because it's been one of my goals since I came into the Green Party. And I came into the Green Party in 2000. David shared a little bit about that. Nathan shared a little bit about that. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my coming into it and put that kind of as a way of showing a picture of diversity and the importance of that diversity in political power. Because ultimately, what we are all about here today is power, and how we shift that power to be something that can take care of our communities, not something that oppresses our communities. Okay, so I like to share a little bit about myself. As you can tell, I'm a Latina. I am a Mexican American. My parents were born in Texas. Some of my grandparents were born in Texas. I commonly hear, "Where are you from?" And I say, "Toledo, Ohio." And people say, but no, where are you really from? And I think to myself, well, Toledo, Ohio. But I know what they're talking about. They're saying, what is your ancestry? Because you're a brown person in a country that thinks of itself kind of in terms of being a white country, a European country. And now, we would not be in this room together if we didn't understand that that is a very incomplete picture. But in any case, you know, I have 6 sisters and 1 brother. My mom and dad were raised very poor. My mom and dad, as I said, they came from Texas, both of them. And has anybody ever heard of the migrant stream? My parents were part of the migrant stream. There are families that used to come up from South Texas to pick in the fields up here in Ohio and Michigan and Wisconsin. And you know, the thing is, I grew up hearing the names of tiny little towns and farms, the names of farms. And I knew those names before I knew English. I was taught to speak Spanish before I was taught to speak English. But, and I know those names of all those little towns and those little farms because those are places where my people worked, where my family worked. And on occasion, when we'd go on vacation, we'd go to one of those farms and stay in the migrant camps, and because that's where our people were. We were visiting our people. But so I was raised very poor in Toledo, Ohio. Until I was 7, I lived in a house that had no indoor plumbing, had no electricity. And we were very poor. Subsequent to that, my dad got a job at the Jeep plant. And my dad, he passed away a couple years ago now, but he was a dues-paying UAW member till the day he died. That's one of the things, yes, excellent. So, you know, we're touching on lots of things here. But the bottom line is that the picture for people of color, the picture for poor people in our country, I call it the American Third World. That's where I come from. I come from the American Third World. And I share that because it is very important for us to acknowledge that that world exists. Because only by acknowledging that world exists will we cure our communities of poverty and of the unequal access to things like health insurance, which really means health care, and education, and jobs. Those are really the keys to success for anybody. We need to have something to do with our lives. We need to be able to support our families. We need to be able to understand our place in the world and our world. We need our education. We need our jobs. And something has gone very, very wrong in our communities. And now we have this heroin epidemic, and we really have a school-to-prison pipeline. There are places where young people are in effect trained to be prisoners, and that's where they end up being. So, you know, for myself, you know, I can look at the trajectory of my life and think I was a lucky person. And I was lucky. I was lucky for a couple of reasons, because having been born poor, you know, right now I'm 63 years old. I have first cousins who were not allowed to go to college because they were women, I have no grandkids. I'm going to share that. I have no grandkids. That's really important to me. You know why? Because a key for women, and particularly women of color, to come out of poverty is to put off having children. So there's a whole realm of another discussion we could have, of what kinds of things impact women and in how they succeed. So anyway, you know, back then, it was a very difficult time to break out of what somebody else's notion of who you were and what you should be. So I share that to say I didn't finish high school. I share that frequently because I want everybody to reassess what you think of people's worth and what you think of what it takes to be a meaningful, contributing person in our society. So I did finish college. Half of my siblings did not finish high school. We all finished college. So, and yes, it was hard work. You know, going to college as an adult without ever having written a paper, that was really hard work. And you really have to work very hard. And I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to say, I was lucky in that. I was lucky in that my parents are smart people, and they passed on some of those good genes to me. So thank you for that. That's the luck of the draw, frankly. But, so about diversity in the Green Party. Now, like many of you, I was a Democrat before I was a Green. Coming out of the labor history that my father came out of, UAW, I remember going to vote with my father in a cinder block, one-room structure way out there in the country, because my father, who, by the way, could not read and write, my father was illiterate, but he figured out, because his union told him, and his union explained to him, we vote, and this is why we vote, and this is why we are community. So I remember going with my dad to vote from when I was very small. So it was something we always did. And being a Democrat, you know, those values felt right to me. But you know what? Eventually, I looked at things like, what are the statistics for Latinos who drop out of high school? And when I dropped out of high school, it was between 50 and 30%. You know what it is now? It's between 50 and 30%. And after a while, you look at statistics like that. You look at things like poverty rates. You look at things like infant mortality rates. And when they don't get better, when your community continues to struggle and suffer, you know you have to do something different. So I say that to say, when I found the Green Party and some very generous and thoughtful people like David Ellison, when I found the Green Party, you know, my first impulse was, these people can't get anything done. and he explained some of that. We were in some really long meetings, and it took some time, and it took some thinking on behalf of some people who were frankly willing to do some unappreciated hard work. So to come up with some structures that were going to work, that were going to make a political party. So, you know, I came into the Green Party in 2000, and I saw the hard work that was being done. And I thought, you know, I don't have anything to lose. The Democrats, they care about winning elections. They do not care about me. They don't have the courage of convictions, all those values right there that Joe was talking about. You know, I have had people approach me and say, well, you know, I become a Green, but, you know, I'm kind of scared, you know. I'm not sure I have the courage of my convictions, you know. I don't know if I have that either. What I have is an unwillingness to accept the unacceptable. That's what I have. I don't know if that takes courage, you know, but that's why I have stayed in the Green Party. Now, here we are, and we have a wonderful opportunity. We can really move forward. We have Connie Goodell Newton, who is going to save our ballot access and make sure that we can get candidates on the ballot. And what will we do with those ballot lines? We will make real changes in community. And you know what? They're scared of that. I know that. You know that. They will push back. So we have to do everything we can to make sure that we have candidates, that our candidates are successful. And that is the next step here. And that is the piece that makes diversity so important. Because without diversity, without us going to the communities that need us most, that's where we have to go. We have to go to the communities that need us most. Because the folks that are doing okay, will they understand our message? No, they won't. It's the people who understand that something is going very wrong. And that, frankly, is a very diverse picture of America. It's the people who are in poverty, and you cannot separate race and poverty in this country. I mean, that's an absolute fact. The other thing is, they're young. Do you realize what the opportunities that we have squandered for this whole generation of young people? We have eroded the educational system. We have made the universities and colleges not an open door and a resource to them, it's a closed door. And when they are absolutely fortunate enough to actually get into a university, what are they saddled with? What happens? They have student loan debt. What does that make? That makes indentured servants, you know? So we have students who are some of our best and our brightest, who come out, they can't get mortgages, they can't buy houses because they have tens of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. So that's part of the diverse picture that we have to have too, is those youth who are standing up and saying, this does not work, we need to change it. And that's the whole message of diversity in the Green Party. So we started caucuses, and I have to tell you that when I came into the Green Party in 2000, I was working on the Nader campaign, and in 2001, I was very honored to be elected to co-chair the National Green Party, the National Committee of the Green Party. So I was part of that group that got National Committee status for the Green Party of the United States, and I helped to open the office in Washington, D.C. I was part of hiring our first staff people for the Green Party of the United States, and I am very honored by that. And one of the things that I did when I was co-chair is I shepherded through a whole range of diversity initiatives. If anybody has ever gone to a national committee meeting and you got a diversity waiver, I wrote that proposal. I always felt that the Green Party had to put their money where their mouth was. If we care about diversity, we have to invest in diversity. And so the other thing that we did in that time is we created caucuses. And that is to give a voice to all of our diverse communities. Because you know what? Can I figure out what is going on in your community better than you? I can't, can I? No. So the whole idea of caucuses is that as a part of that National Committee of the Green Party, not separate from, but as a meaningful part of, we have caucuses that are empowered to make policy and make decisions based on their best understanding of the problems in their communities and how to solve them. And it's as simple as that. So there's some sign-up sheets for the caucuses. And right now I have to tell you, I am working very hard on forming a women's caucus here in Ohio. And that's for some very specific reasons. I'm unemployed. I just recently retired. I retired because I was unemployed and couldn't get a job, okay? And my last job was as a patient advocate in an abortion clinic. Well, that clinic was closed because of regulations from the state, okay? So I was also president of the Ohio chapter of the National Organization for Women for a couple of years. And so I think it's really important that we push back on some women's issues right here, right now in Ohio. And there's ways that you can sign up. So I hope every woman signs up, every person of color, every youth, every gay, lesbian, transgender. What other caucus? We have a disability caucus that is still forming, but that's going to come along. So anybody who is part of a caucus, please sign up on one of those sheets. We'll put you in touch with the people who are moving that in this state. And if it's the Women's Caucus, it's probably going to be me and Connie and Suzanne and a couple of other folks. Was there anything else that I needed to share with you about diversity? Okay, one last thing. This is a little story. A group of us from Ohio recently went to the National Committee meeting in New Jersey. It was a wonderful meeting. It was a very good discussion. It was a very diverse group. It was really good. And I ran again for co-chair. Jill Stein had approached me and she had asked me to run to be co-chair of the National Committee, and it had been a number of years since I had served, so I agreed to do it. And I got elected co-chair of the National Committee. Yay! So after that, the same day I was elected, I resigned. Okay? And I'm going to share with you, I know that sounds goofy. Why would you even run for something that you're going to turn around and say, no, I'm not going to do it? Well, what happened was there were 7 of us running. 4 of us were going to get elected, 3 were not, because there were 4 seats. We had a very diverse group of candidates. However, the 3 candidates who were not elected were the only 3 African American candidates. So we had 7 co-chairs. Of those, 1 of them was an African American. And, you know, when I realized that,